talking about another part of our American history that has challenged unjust systems and helped advocate for a more equal society, yet little of it is known today. African American sailors have always played a significant role in the U.S. Navy, consistently overcoming challenges and discrimination. The Port Chicago disaster is known as an explosion that happened on the night of July 17, 1944, in Port Chicago, California. Two ships that were getting fully loaded with ammunition bound for the Pacific Theater exploded, causing immediate death, deadly injuries, and damages. 320 sailors were instantly killed, and 100 other military personnel and civilians were injured in the process. The blast left the base in ruins, and the aftermath was very chaotic, leaving the sailors too distraught to comprehend the situation. It completely demolished the ship's center of the blast and created a massive crater where the pier previously was located. It also heavily damaged Port Chicago, which was a small town located only 1.5 miles away. Property damage left over cost millions of dollars, and the glare from the explosion could be seen all the way in San Francisco. Out of the 320 sailors killed, 202 of them were African American sailors. The main reasoning behind this was because of a standard operating procedure within the segregated Navy at the time. Every man handling ammunition at Port Chicago was black, while every commissioned officer was white. African Americans were familiar with a sense of racism in the country, but it wasn't until after the disaster that they had come to terms with the unnecessary danger they were being put at risk of. African Americans found themselves in positions within the military that included tasks and services that supported white troops and officers. The discrimination towards them in the military or Navy included discrimination in pay, promotions, ratings, and segregated units. This normally applied with the discrimination that African Americans faced in their own civilian lives, which was not uncommon during this period. Following World War I, the Navy tried altogether to exclude blacks from joining, but the need for messmen and stewards overlooked the policy and eventually led to a reversal of it. The number of black recruits in the Navy were still limited, and the tasks imposed on them were supposed to be at a minimum. The training system for black sailors integrated into the service remained segregated and insufficient. Most of the sailors that were loading ammunition at Port Chicago were very young, ranging from ages of teens to young adults. The conditions were known to be very dangerous, gruesome, and have inadequate safety measures. The black sailors' work within the Navy played a crucial role in the war effort, and sailors were expected to work quickly to meet unrealistic requirements. Most of the dangers being faced were due to the lack of training and hazardous conditions. Sailors were driven in their work by a sense of duty to their nation and hopes of returning to their families safely. The course of events after the explosion is what really caused black sailors to finally take a stand. Sailors were given the task of cleaning up the base, which was covered in pieces of body parts. They were then brought to another base with no details and expected to return back to work at the loading docks. It was then that 250 sailors refused to go back to work without the proper equipment and under the unsafe working conditions that they were previously working under. This was considered a very bold act of defiance against the government, and all men were eventually court-martialed. Many of the black sailors, fearing repercussions, decided to go back to work, but the term Port Chicago 50 came to be known when 50 of those men still refused. All 50 men were charged with mutiny, which was a serious offense that carried harsh penalties. They did not receive the death penalty, but instead were convicted for lengthy prison terms that ranged up to 15 years. Although the men eventually did not serve the whole terms, the trial received national attention for highlighting racial biases and discrimination within the military. It also inspired many to stand against the treatment against African American servicemen. An author named Steve Scheiken wrote about all the events and information surrounding Port Chicago 50 in his young adult book. On July 17, 2024, the Port Chicago 50, along with the other men that were court-martialed, were exonerated by the Secretary of Navy. The exoneration acknowledged the impact the travesty caused these men and released the burden and stain in which their military records carry and has affected their descendants. Many descendants and family did not find out about this history until years later. This story reminds us of the sacrifices made by these men in pursuit of basic human rights and continues to inspire efforts to promote equality. The Port Chicago legacy continues to live on, signifying a vital part of American history that helps stimulate desegregating the United States Armed Forces and help fight for civil rights. This story exemplifies resilience and determination and helps shed light on the systematic racism during this era.